I will tell you the truth now, because I am old enough that the truth costs me nothing and keeps me nothing. For 40 years I carried a ring in the breast pocket of whatever coat I wore. It was a plain gold band, too small for any finger of mine, bought from a silversmith in the village of Ashwick in the autumn of my 24th year. I bought it the week before my father summoned me home from Thornmere and told me I was to sail for Lisbon on Friday. There was no argument he would hear. There was no delay he would grant. I sailed on Friday. I did not get to say goodbye to Cecily Morn. That is the whole engine of it, I think, the thing that set 40 years turning. A young man who did not get to say goodbye, and a young woman who did not know why he had gone, and a silence that hardened on both sides into something neither of us was willing to break by marrying anyone else. I was 24. She was 22. She was the vicar's daughter, which is to say she was considered charming company for an afternoon and entirely unsuitable for anything more permanent. My father made the calculation in under a minute. I had been making a different one all summer, the way she corrected my Latin without apology, the way she laughed when I fell off the estate while attempting to pick her a late rose, the way she looked at me across the harvest supper as though she already knew everything I was going to say and intended to hold me to every word. I had not yet said the words. But I left a letter with her mother. I said, I am going abroad. I do not know for how long. I made you a promise on the last evening we sat together in the garden, even if I did not speak it plainly, and I intend to keep it. Wait for me, if you can. She did not write back, I thought, for years, because she had not waited. A solicitor's note reached me in Lisbon 3 months later. It said simply that Miss Morn had received my letter and had nothing to reply. I read that as the answer it seemed to be. I did not pursue it. What I learned, 40 years later, standing in my own estate library with her in front of me, was that my father had written to her mother first. His note was specific and unkind. It told Mrs. Morn that her daughter had misunderstood the nature of a young gentleman's summer attentions, that no formal intention had been expressed, and that a prompt and dignified silence would serve everyone. Her mother, practical and frightened, had told Cecily to let it lie. Cecily had let it lie. Her silence was not the refusal I read it as. It was the dignity of a woman who had been told, clearly, that she did not have the right to speak. I did not know any of this until that October afternoon at Thornmere Hall. I had inherited the dukedom when I was 36, the year my uncle died without issue and the title came sideways to me, the younger son who had spent 12 years in parliamentary service and estate work abroad. I came home to Thornmere for the first time as its duke, and I stood at the library window and looked out at the village of Ashwick in the grey autumn rain, and I thought about Cecily Morn. I made inquiries through the estate solicitor, discreet ones, the kind a duke may make without exciting comment. The report came back that a Miss Morn was serving as schoolmistress at the Ashwick village school and had never married. I sat with that information for a long evening. I was 40 years old and I had carried her ring for 16 years. I had no reason to go to her, and every reason. I was afraid, which is not something a man of my rank is encouraged to admit. I was afraid that I had waited too long. That whatever she had once felt, if she had felt anything, had long since settled into something quiet and finished. That I would go to her and she would look at me with the polite distance of a woman who had simply moved on, and I would have to carry that home to Thornmere and live with it. I did not go to her. I told myself I would wait until I understood what I intended to say. 24 years passed. I am not proud of that. I say it plainly because it is plain, I was a coward. Not a cruel man, I think, I was not deliberately absent, I was not cavalier, I did not forget her and fill the years with other women and other promises. I thought about her with a regularity that would have alarmed me if I had been less stubborn. I arranged, through the solicitor, an anonymous contribution to the Ashwick School Fund that I renewed every year. I arranged, anonymously, for the vicarage roof to be repaired after the winter of 1841 when the whole north side came in. I sent, through a London bookseller with instructions to say only that they came from an admirer of her work, a set of Latin texts when I heard the village school had none. I was, in every way that did not require me to stand in front of her and speak, entirely devoted to Cecily Morn. It is an absurd way to love someone. I am aware of that. What brought me to her at last was not courage. It was my steward, a blunt Northumbrian named Croft who had been with the estate for 20 years and who regarded my more private arrangements with the resigned patience of a man who has seen everything. He came to me in the first week of October with the annual school accounts and said, without looking up from the ledger, that Miss Morn had written to the solicitor's office to inquire whether the anonymous donor wished to remain anonymous, as she had something she wished to say to him and could not say it to a blind address. I set down my pen. She knows, I said. She has apparently known for some years, Croft said. She recognized the Latin texts. She said she knows of only one man who would have known she needed them and been too proud to sign his name. I rode to Ashwick the following morning. The village school was a low stone building set back from the green, with a small garden that had been planted with more ambition than resources. The door was open. I could hear her before I reached it, a clear, unhurried voice working through a conjugation with a room full of children, the same voice I had heard correct my Latin 40 years ago, a little lower now, entirely steady. I waited until the lesson was done. She came to the door and stopped. She was 62 years old. Her hair, which had been dark brown and pinned loosely at her neck, was now white, worn in the same loose arrangement. Her face was lined in the way of a woman who has spent 40 years looking directly at everything that needed looking at. She was not a diminished version of the girl I remembered. She was exactly what that girl had become, and she was, I have no better word, magnificent. We looked at each other for a long moment. Your Grace, she said. Her voice was entirely level. Miss Morn, I said. And then, because I had rehearsed nothing and every prepared sentence had left me on the ride over, I said only, I am late. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you are. Would you come in? I came in. The schoolroom smelled of chalk and old paper and something faintly like dried lavender. She put the kettle on without asking whether I wanted tea, which is a thing she had always done, and I sat at the table where her younger students had sat that morning and felt, in an entirely unreasonable way, as though only a few years had passed and not 40. She poured the tea. She sat across from me. She said, the roof. Yes, I said. The Latin texts. Yes. The school fund, every year since 1837. Yes. She wrapped her hands around her cup and looked at me steadily. I want to know why you never came, she said. Not in anger. Not in the voice of a woman delivering a grievance she has held and sharpened. In the voice of a woman who has carried a question for 40 years and simply wants the true answer. I told her. All of it. The letter I left with her mother. The solicitor's note I received that I read as her silence. The 16 years I carried the ring before I knew she had not married. The 24 years I spent being afraid to stand in front of her and ask whether any of it still mattered. She listened without interruption. When I finished, she set down her cup and said, my mother told me you had not meant anything by the summer. She told me the letter was a kindness and I was to treat it as such and not reply. I know, I said. I learned that only last week from my steward. She was quiet again. Outside, the children had come out to the green and were making the ordinary noise of children at liberty. I kept your letter, she said at last. I have it still. I did not keep it because I expected you to come. I kept it because it was true, what you wrote, and I had no intention of pretending it was not. Something in my chest, which had been braced against some kind of verdict for 40 years, went entirely quiet. I brought something, I said. I set the ring on the table between us. The plain gold band from the silversmith in Ashwick, bought the week before I sailed. Small and plain and worn from 40 years in my breast pocket. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at me. You carried that, she said. Every day. For 40 years. Every day. She reached out and picked it up. She turned it in her fingers, reading something in it that I had put there not by inscription but by time. Then she set it back on the table and said, with the same unhurried steadiness she had brought to every conjugation that morning, ask me properly, Gideon. You owe me that much. She was right. I did. I asked her properly. I will not set down exactly what I said, because it was long and halting and not at all what a man of my rank is supposed to offer a woman, but it was true in every word, and she deserved that more than she deserved eloquence. When I finished, she said yes. We were married 11 days later in the Ashwick village chapel, at 4:30 in the afternoon, with the last of the October light coming through the old east window and Mr. Croft as our only witness, because neither of us had any interest in an audience. The ring went on her finger and fit as though it had been made for no one else, which in every sense that mattered it had not. Afterward, we walked back across the green in the grey dusk, and she took my arm the way she had taken it at the harvest supper 40 years before, without ceremony, as though it were simply the natural arrangement of things. "You should have come sooner," she said. "I know," I said. "You were afraid." "Entirely." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "So was I. Every year when the school fund came in and I thought about writing to the solicitor and asking, I was afraid too. That it had simply been kindness and nothing more. That if I asked, the answer would be nothing." "It was never nothing," I said. "No," she said. "I know that now." We walked the rest of the way home in the kind of silence that does not need to be filled. The kind that comes when two people have said, at last, the true thing, and discovered it was waited for on both sides. She is sitting across from me now as I write this, reading, as she does most evenings, in the chair by the fire. She has the Latin texts open, the ones I sent through the London bookseller in 1839, and she corrects my memory of the declensions when I get them wrong, which is often. She has been doing this for 3 years now, ever since November of that year, when we came home from the chapel and she put the Latin on the shelf and said it was time someone taught me to do it properly. It is, I have decided, the best use of my remaining years. That is what 40 years of faithfulness earns you, if you have the good sense to finally go and ask. Not a grand reversal. Not a hall full of witnesses and a humbled enemy. Only a woman who waited because the truth was the truth, and a man who came at last because he could not spend another winter not coming, and an October evening in a village chapel where a promise, kept on both sides, was spoken aloud for the first time. It was enough. It was, in the end, everything.